Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ATI Podcast. We're here for episode 140, and we have Iodine recording artist DROUGHT with us on the call tonight. How we doing, folks?
Solid.
Great. Thanks for having us.
We're so stoked to have you guys on here. I was doing a little gush before we got started tonight, letting you guys know that I'm a big fan of what I've heard so far. I know we just got the self-titled EP that came out last year, and then we got the single that came out this year as well. It's right up my alley as far as things and anything adjacent to emo, post-hardcore, screamo. I think it's just kind of hitting all those notes, of course. You know, you guys have kind of a sound that is very much a callback, I'll say, to like a lot of formative years of my musical listening, post-hardcore scene of the 2000s. But you guys are also kind of implementing some new things atmospherically and tonally, what you guys are doing. So I'm really excited about the music you guys are creating.
Appreciate that. That's
great to hear.
You know, I know that the band's early on as well, so that there's some limited footage out there of live performances and that sort of thing. So I will definitely have in the episode details and links for folks to check out any of those that are available on YouTube. But I know that I saw a show in Oakland that we're going to get to tonight as well. It almost looked like a room venue maybe, or kind of a DIY venue of sorts. But let's get things started. Just kind of your individual music journeys. Is there something in particular that profound that happened in your life that kind of led you toward your instruments or pursuing music in a creative fashion? How about for you, Eric? Let's get started with you.
Well, I guess funny enough, we are all bassists. We all started out as bassists, so that's one thing that I can say for all of us. But yeah, I guess when I was in middle school is when I really started getting turned on to punk music, you know, learning about the Dead Kennedys. That was a super formative band. And I think still a lot of the kind of unique instrumentation, it just offered something that, like, even when I started discovering other sort of like subgenres of punk, I think like that definitely, yeah, that band still had a place in all of it. And then, yeah, I started playing bass in like 9th grade, I guess, and just kind of, I don't know, found people to start playing music with, and, you know, people with similar taste, more or less. And then, you know, played in just small kind of punk bands throughout high school. Yeah, so that was kind of the deal for me. And then eventually, you know, went from playing bass to playing guitar, and then as I was entering my college years, music started fading a little bit. I got really interested in photography, and then, yeah, eventually kind of had to make a choice about whether I wanted to really continue playing music or whether I wanted to focus on school, and school went out. So I ended up selling all of my guitars and gear and not playing for a decade plus, up until the pandemic. So yeah, that's sort of my story musically.
Is the pandemic just kind of a profound event that drew you back to pick the guitar back up with whatever time you may have had on your hands, or what kind of led you back? Yeah,
that was exactly it. Yeah, I think when it became apparent that the pandemic was going to be more than a couple weeks long, I realized that I needed to, and you know, I don't know how it was in any other states, but at least out here in the Bay Area in California, like the lockdown restrictions were pretty, I think everyone was taking them pretty seriously. And so, yeah, I was just looking for really an outlet, something that I could do at home by myself. And so, yeah, that's when I decided to pick up a guitar again and start playing, trying to relearn.
Was it very difficult for you, or did you have a lot of muscle memory still yet that you picked right up onto?
There was a decent amount of muscle memory there, but yeah, I mean, I was definitely quite rusty. But I feel like I had this sort of like sort of stashed away like musical creativity that I hadn't touched in a while. So as soon as I kind of got reacquainted with playing, I was pretty quick to start writing again.
Ray, how about for you?
Oh man, well, mom put my brother and I in piano lessons when we were kids. My parents didn't have very good taste in music, so I'd say
You had to figure that one out.
yeah, I had to figure that one out. And I think getting into like skateboarding and skateboard culture, and the friends I've made through that have really shaped my interest in like and love for like skate punk and just heavier music in general. And you know, in high school and college, developed even further. And yeah, just kind of been jamming with friends here and there ever since like middle school.
People don't realize how profound skate culture can be on musical, acquiring of taste in general. Like I never skated myself, but I had friends that did skate. So we would watch skate videos and I found out all about a lot of bands just through skate videos or even skate magazines, and skateboarders would wear their shirts. But it was a different time then as well. That's what we're
Totally.
talking over 20 years ago. So, but yeah, people, I don't know if that's something that profound that happens today for folks, but that certainly was a huge outlet for discovery for me personally. RJ, how about for you?
When I was like relatively young, maybe grade school, I wanted to. There were some neighbor kids that were all in a band, and for whatever reason, bass was just the coolest. Maybe it's because like the coolest guy was playing bass, and I was like, I want to be like him. But was drawn to playing bass and had a couple like false starts with that. But by the time I was in high school, it was like I was kind of like late to playing. I didn't pick up an instrument until I was 16, but it just really clicked for me. I think that the getting into punk rock, I grew up in the Midwest where like I feel like things kind of you kind of didn't discover things till a little bit later.
Definitely.
Things, like cool things didn't make their way to the middle of the country, and like
Yeah, we're
later.
at least 10 to 15 years behind here.
Yeah,
I'm south of St. Louis, so I can speak to it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think we were just like super hungry for anything we get our hands on, and skate videos were huge for that. But around the time, I think like one of the most profound things musically that I could probably speak to is getting into music when I got into it in the way I did, and my interest in politics, like getting into punk, that was something that really resonated for me, like the connection to like community, and it wasn't like fuck everything, but it was more like, well, this stuff over here seems kind of fucked up, and I don't think that's cool. And there's like other people that kind of feel that way too, that seem to like a lot of the same stuff. And it just seemed like a unique kind of culture that I hadn't really experienced before, and that really resonated with me and like very much drew me in, and like drew me into like activism. And yeah,
kind of piggybacking off of that, what drew me to the scene as well is just the inclusivity as well. It's just everybody was invited, and all these outcasts, like I felt like I was, somehow made it work amongst themselves too, but a lot of like-minded people identifying the atrocities that are taking place in the world, whether it's socially or economically or foreign affairs or whatever the case is,
Yeah, and then I think one of the things that might be kind of a thread, and that's like a kind of an important part of the band's journey, is I also gave up on music for about 15 years. I moved out of state and didn't bring any gear with me. Found like kind of life took me in other directions, got more into other kind of arts. But similar to Eric, all that time at home during the pandemic, and too much time on my cell phone, too much time reading the news, too much time just kind of like doom scrolling, was like, it can't just be like input. I can't just be like digesting negativity constantly. Like I want to focus on some things that like bring me joy and that I can put back into the world, instead of just like having this like negative consumption of media. But yeah, like the pandemic was instrumental in getting back into music.
RJ, you're the only person in the band that's not like a Bay Area person per se. So what led you to the Bay Area?
I left Wisconsin about 15 years ago and moved to New York kind of by accident. Just there was a job opportunity that was a summer-long position, and stayed there for 5 years. Just was like kind of captivated by opportunity and just like the vast like differences of people there that I had grown up with. I grew up in a pretty small town in Wisconsin. And the outdoors were a really big part of my life. I rode my bike a lot and didn't want to wear pants anymore. I didn't want to be cold. And
It's understandable.
was kind of getting to a place where it was either I like put down roots in New York and stay there and like figure out a way to make it work, or try something new. And I knew that if I didn't do it then, that I just probably wasn't going to. So kind of just jumped at an opportunity. I'd never been to New York before I moved there. And similarly, when this other opportunity came up for me to move to San Francisco, I had never been to California. So it was kind of just a Hail Mary, like threw everything in the car back when I could fit everything in a car, and just gave it a go.
Well, that's awesome to have the courage to do something like that. I know a lot of people are just stifled by the fear of even thinking about doing something like that, let alone committing to doing it.
I was just going to say, I think it's easier when you're younger. I think it's,
Definitely.
as you get older, it
For
gets
sure.
a lot scarier.
Yeah, you get a little bit more set in your ways in life and make excuses as well.
I'm scared to get out of bed.
Yeah, me too, brother, sometimes, for sure. So, Viggy, what's something profound music-wise that led you on this journey?
It's a good question. I think like a lot of people that make this kind of music that's like a little bit more inward looking for punk. I was a pretty lonely kid, and like Ray, like it's not like my parents were listening to music. I'm not gonna say they didn't listen to cool music, because it's cool now. It just what back then, it's like having parents that listen to ABBA and Boney M and Neil Diamond. And then mostly Bollywood songs isn't going to like make you the coolest kid in school. But even then, it was like finding ways to relate to people was a little bit challenging. And I remember in high school there was a woman in my a girl, I guess at that point in my sophomore year of class, who like came to school with a Discman with Sunny Day Real Estate's third record, How It Feels to Be Something on. And I remember hearing it and being like, oh my God, like this is so expressive and beautiful. And, it's almost like cinematic in its like scope. And I just didn't know music could be like that, as well as being largely made by in sort of like this DIY way. So I think that really like spurred me to go deeper into the punk world. And like I always like wrote like poetry and stuff like that. And the beautiful thing about punk, and this is not my quote, is that it's for everyone, but not just anyone. And so I felt like cool, like back then at least, because it wasn't all over the internet, everyone who like was discovering this kind of music kind of did this in this way where you'd have to go to a record store, buy a CD, not know what you were going to hear, and then word of mouth, or maybe you have a college radio station in town, and you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. So, and then played in a couple of bands when I was young, and kind of picking up on Eric and RJ's points. I played in some bands through high school and into my first year of college, and then took a decent amount of time off. And during the pandemic, similarly ended up returning to it because it felt like I'd like cut off a limb. You spend so much of your life kind of moving forward, and then the pandemic sort of forced everyone into like being alone for longer periods of time. And you come face to face with yourself, and it's like, oh my God, like here's this thing that was such a core part of my identity. How could I let it go like that? So I think that sort of brought me back. But it's always been a combination of like, yeah, it's like one thing for me to express myself, but it's like I think more importantly like a way to connect with other people, which I'm sure it is for most people in this scene, right? It's not just bands.
Sure.
It's like people who go to shows, like everything. There's always there's a reason they call it a scene.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I often find folks in this creative field it's maybe a little difficult for them to express themselves in any other way, quite frankly. What a beautiful thing to do, though, just make beautiful music and people enjoy it, and people congregate to listen to it. So yeah, I mean, come on. Especially, having that time, everybody here in the band during the pandemic to sit with your thoughts and prioritize what's important to you individually. That makes this whole thing even more beautiful to me, in my opinion, guys, because you guys are doing it for the love of the game. And
it's especially funny because Ray and I met when we were both kind of in high school, like getting fresh out of there. So it's kind of funny to be sort of full circle, like actually making something together now.
Yeah, that's the next thing I was going to ask is, considering there's a lot of Bay Area people in the band and y'all being playing in the scene in and of itself and going to shows. I would imagine that y'all kind of ran into each other at various times. It's a big area, though, too. It's very possible that you did not. So I was just kind of curious if you guys had any rapport prior to starting the band.
I feel like Eric should answer this one.
Yeah, this is the best like part of Drought, the Drought story.
Okay. So aside from Viggy and Ray knowing each or having met in high school at some point, the answer is basically no. Although Viggy and I both lived in Sacramento for a time, or I'm actually from the Sacramento area, and Viggy lived there for a while, so it's totally possible that we crossed paths at some point, but neither of us remember because we, as you just heard, most of us had kind of been out of the game for a while. Like I actually found it quite difficult to figure out like where all the DIY stuff was happening in the Bay Area. It's interesting because I don't feel like there's like gatekeeping per se, but I don't know. I didn't know where to look. Like I still went to shows, once I moved here, but like I wasn't going to like house shows or warehouse shows or, anything super DIY. So, that being said, I also, when I decided that I wanted to start playing with other people and start a band, I also didn't really know where to find people. And that was exacerbated by the fact that it was during the pandemic when you weren't even really supposed to like, hang out with anyone outside of your little family unit. And so I ended up just putting an ad on Craigslist with kind of describing the style of music that I was looking to make and, listed off like a few sort of bands that would serve as like inspiration for the sound. And both Ray and Viggy responded to the Craigslist ad. And it was kind of slow moving in terms of meeting up with these guys. Again, just pandemic stuff.
Yeah,
blah, blah,
situation
blah.
was what it was.
But then, we eventually did meet up. Of course, then Viggy and Ray like realized that they knew each other already. And so that was kind of like the beginnings of how the band started.
How did you get involved, RJ?
Rick and I had a few kind of like missed connection moments. We were at a friend's, let's call it a cookout, and I ended up talking with Eric's partner. We were kind of in one area of this hangout, and Eric and my partner were in this other area. And coincidentally, Eric's partner and I kind of knew each other from I do illustration and graphic design. I kind of knew her from some art adjacent stuff. And we kind of just were at this event and never really spoke to each other. And then like maybe a week later, we were at a show, and kind of the same thing happened. Like Eric and I were there, but didn't talk. He ended up seeing my partner, and it's like, oh, hey. And like they exchanged pleasantries, and then that was it. And a couple days later, Eric sent me a message on Instagram. He's like, hey, I heard you're kind of looking to get back into music. We're like trying out guitarist. And yeah, I cruised, I like went by the space maybe a couple days later and was too embarrassed and like unsure of my abilities that the first time I went by, I didn't even play. I was just like, cool, this is like what you're doing. And I was like, I think it would be a disservice to everybody if I tried to play along with you guys right now. So I'm just, I'll check back in with you in like a couple weeks or something. That was kind of it. Just like, I think one thing that's really amazing about the band is how well we all connect with each other. And while all of us kind of share a similar punk rock background, I kind of didn't know the sound that like these guys I think have a bit more in common musically, like that they know a lot more of like certain Bay Area bands, or they I think connected on some musical things that I wasn't really aware of. So I didn't really get it at first, but I really liked all of them. And I was like, oh, I think like I don't know what this is about exactly, but I'm kind of down to find out.
Yeah. Was there a particular moment that kind of convinced you to, I know you said the first time you came by the space, you didn't really play with them, but was there a moment that, a light bulb moment, a light switch moment that you were like, this is something I'm going to pursue?
Yeah, actually. The first time I came through was with a slightly like we had a friend that was playing bass for the EP, but otherwise it was Eric and Ray and our friend Chris that was playing bass. And Viggy wasn't there; he was out of town. And it wasn't until I heard maybe like a voice memo that they had recorded on their iPhones or whatever that it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, it's like kind of prettier music with like more aggressive, like driving vocals and drums. You know, like it like provided a little bit more of like an edge that I think helped inform the rest of what was kind of going on. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. I'm into this. So yeah, it was pretty much Viggy. Viggy was the thing.
Blame it on Vicky.
I
I
wasn't
love.
even there.
Yeah. Well, what I love hearing is the fact that you came from an entirely different background and it works. And I think that's probably why it works too, because there is such an array of sounds, a palette of things happening sonically in the band. So maybe you're just adding that other perspective, that missing piece, if you will. But yeah, you bring up another interesting point. If you strip back some of the layers of the band, maybe it sounds entirely different, but the presentation of, the punchy spastic drumming at times and Viggy's vocals, speaking of which, Viggy, you mentioned earlier writing poetry, and that is definitely evident in those lyrics, my friend. Consequential love, man, what a heartstring puller. I feel like that's just as far as lyrically, I think that might be my favorite track of your guys's.
Damn. Okay, that's really, really sweet to hear. I'm really glad that connected for you.
Yeah, that doesn't really surprise me because reading through them, I was like, this is very poetic, and this guy has a lot to say, and I think I'm going to start listening more. So, and lyrics aren't always the thing. Actually, honestly, as a drummer by nature, most of what I listen for is how locked down is the rhythm section. Is there something hooky melody wise that I like? What type of atmosphere are they building? And do I not hate the vocals? The vocals are typically the thing that I look at last. I can't tell you what I like, but I can tell you what I don't like. It's kind of that situation. But yeah, that was something that stood out to me right away, Viggy, was your vocal presentation, the clarity at which you say things, interesting diction at times, again, the poetic nature of some of your lyrics.
I really appreciate that.
I feel the same way.
It's nice to hear.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, kind of going back to sort of following up on what RJ had said. I think that the fact that because we tried out several guitarists, we had, a number of people come through, and a lot of them knew kind of exactly what we were doing as soon as they heard the music. And I think the fact that RJ like kind of didn't have a lot of touch points for some of our collective influences is the thing that sort of made up my mind about having him join. Is because I was like, I want to find the person who like has the different perspective and can like inject something, that the rest of us can't.
I love that. And it makes for definitely a different dynamic to a band. And one thing that you guys kind of touched on earlier too is, the fact of actually enjoying each other's company, each other's people. I know at my older age, whenever I choose to make decisions to play music with people, that is a huge importance, and obviously the comfortability that brings in and of itself. But, personalities and personality conflicts and those sorts of things become much more important, I think, as we get older and our time is more precious, and, and we're trying to be serious about something. So I love to hear that there's a brotherhood in the band as well.
Big time.
The first EP you guys released last year, I believe it was in April, 3-song EP, and all 3 bangers. We've got Consequential Love, I mentioned earlier, Oh Javelin, and MacArthur Station. I'm kind of curious to hear, are any of these 3 tracks the first song that you wrote, or was this kind of something that you whittled away at and this was the best of what you guys originally wrote? I'm just kind of curious of your guys' creative process.
Yeah, I actually dug up my home recording iPhone demo of MacArthur. It was more or less that song, MacArthur Station. I think with the rest of the band, obviously, some things changed. But the kind of structure was there, and that was, I think that was basically, I had written parts of other things, but that just happened to be kind of like the first, like in air quotes, full song that I wrote when I started playing again. And so like naturally that was the kind of easy thing to bring into the practice space for everyone to kind of like jam on and write to. But yeah.
I know you guys are probably working on some other music as well, but I'm just kind of curious, again, in these early aughts, is there a particular riff or anything that really kind of just drew you in, and maybe have some favorite moments in the first creations of some of these songs as well?
Yeah, I think just for me at least, meeting up with the guys for the first time and kind of hearing like snippets of Eric's guitar ideas. When we first met up, I just felt everything was really organic. Like that song, MacArthur Station, before it had a title, just felt right. It just felt natural. We kind of banged it out effortlessly. And I think that's always a good sign of things to come and the direction we're headed in. So yeah, it just felt right, in other words.
When things come naturally, I think it yields some of the most beautiful results for sure. I'm not a big fan of forcing things. If you're forcing it, I think the listener can tell at some point, especially a trained or seasoned ear for sure.
Yeah, to answer your question a little bit in a broader way, the songs from the EP are not the best of a greater collection. Those were just the 3 songs we knew how to play together. And the kind of motivating factor to record those songs was our friend Chris was moving on from the project. And anybody that's in a band, I'm sure, has experienced writing songs and then never recording them, and maybe a band breaks up or things change and you just never have that like memento or keepsake. And personally, like I've had that happen a number of times, and in bands that I've been like super close with the people of, and I've always wished I had those, even like bad recordings. So when we decided to record the EP, I don't think we had like much grander ambitions. We weren't sure initially, I think, if we were going to release it. It was more just like, let's do this. And we don't know how things are going to look after Chris leaves. So we got together, and we're lucky enough that our rehearsal space is down the hall from a beautiful studio in Oakland called Sharkbite. After we heard the songs, like speaking for myself, it was like the best recording I had ever had of anything I had ever done. And I think the consensus was like, oh, maybe we should do something with this after all. Like, why not? We have it. So it kind of snowballed that we ended up partnering with some friends and released a tape, decided to put it on streaming. And shortly thereafter, our friends at Iodine, by way of Jerome's Dream, actually, the guys and Eric from JD,
Great folks,
whispered in Iodine's ear, and our friend Tom, who does some graphic design for Iodine, also happened to mention us. And yeah, it just so happened that they were interested in pressing it. So this thing that we didn't really have, a lot of interest in really putting out there, next thing we knew was getting ready to receive our copies of it. So it just like exceeded all of our expectations, and it was, yeah, like I think that it was especially rewarding because we didn't set out to do that. So it was really amazing.
I would assume the Jerome's Dream connection came via, playing shows. I think all those guys live out in the Bay Area or close to now. Used to be Northeast guys, but moved out there.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the guys remembers specifically, but I think it was like our second show or something, fourth show.
It was our 4th.
Yeah, and we just kind of hit it off with them.
That's great.
Really fortunate.
Yeah, I really love those guys. They're real ones. They're all about bringing people up in the scene with them as well. They really subscribe to that old school, pure hardcore punk DIY mentality. I got a lot of respect for them, and they're just out there doing their thing quietly and putting out the good word for people. And, those gentlemen deserve their flowers as well, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, and then of course you guys have the new single that you put out earlier this year. Is this going to be contributing to something you have in the works, or is this just a standoff single? What do we got cooking here? What can we talk about?
Yeah, this one, it's part of a broader compilation. So our early, we were getting back to the shows we were playing. We were really lucky in many ways. And within our first 6 shows, we'd played with Jerome's Dream, of course. We had there's this great band called Othiel that's been coming up in Southern California, Growing Pains, Mauve, our friends in Mao. We played with City of Caterpillar and Entry. And then there was one band, the Holy Ghost Tabernacle Choir from Georgia, who were rolling through. And we just sort of hit it off with them as well. And they eventually mentioned that they were putting together and a tribute record for the what is it, the 20-year anniversary of Death Cab for Cutie's transatlanticism, and asked whether we wanted to do a song for it. And we kind of jumped at the chance. It was we knew what song we wanted to do almost out the gate. We were like, is Death of an Interior Decorator still available? And decided, hey, let's challenge ourselves a little bit. Aside from that, we basically knew 6 songs at the time, and we're like, let's maybe we can try this kind of fun exercise. We recorded it actually in our practice space with Ryan Ellery, and she's a great engineer and helped us on our EP as well. And that's kind of how it came together. The compilation is pretty broad. So Holy Ghost Tabernacle Choir do a cover of The New Year. Hidden Mothers is on it. Dreamwell, Caregiver, ton of different bands, different styles. There's some that are incredibly heavy and some that are, there's some bands that are basically like post-metal bands, and then there's other bands that are just like straight up punk bands, and it's really cool. So they're releasing it actually, I think today, like the day we're recording this, it's out on CD and cassette, and it's benefiting a couple of nonprofits. So that's how that came together. And it's a bit of a stopgap because we haven't mentioned it yet, but we've completed recording our full-length record, and that's coming out this June. So there's going to be a lot more where that came from.
Oh man, that's awesome. That excites the hell out of me. I can't wait to see more about that. So how many new tracks can we expect? Can you talk about that?
With interludes and everything, it's 13 tracks.
Okay.
Some of them are instrumental or soundscapey. But yeah, it's definitely filling up an LP.
It's 12. I think it's 12 like kind of complete traditional songs, and then there's some other tracks in there of introduction or interludes.
Who recorded the album for you guys? Who'd you work with engineering wise?
We went to Jack Shirley.
Hell yeah.
At Atomic Garden in Oakland.
Jack is amazing talent. Of course, he did the Jerome's Dream record. He did Deaf Heaven, from what I can remember off the top of my head. And did he not do the last Gouge Away album as well? I want to say
he did.
Yeah.
He's also done like Joyce Manor and King Woman, and just I think one of the reasons we went to him was that for us, we have loud moments, soft moments, aggressive ones, sad ones, even some happy ones on the new one, and I think we wanted an engineer that would kind of understand that breadth and not just be like, okay, like how can we make something that just sounds heavy, right? So there's a pretty wide array of sounds on there.
Yeah, I like Jack a lot because he knows how to manage space and dynamics, and that's really important, I think, especially for a band like you guys. As you mentioned, you have the kind of those more mellow moments, and a lot of what you guys do, attacking rhythmically your instruments, the notation, is how kind of what accentuates that. And a lot of bands could do a lot for themselves if they have a better understanding of dynamics, and I think that's something you guys just naturally have dialed in as well. So I'm excited to hear how that translates to the recordings that Jack captured as well.
That's really kind of you to say. Really appreciate hearing that.
So we're looking at maybe June, and I would assume a lot of work's going behind this outside of just the recording of the tracks. You guys are having it mixed and mastered on the back end, of course. I'm sure you got some folks working on graphic design for you guys, or is there any other creative aspects going into this that's pretty exciting for you guys that you want to talk about?
You may periodically see me looking off camera, and it's because I'm working on album layout.
Awesome.
A bit. Our friend Tom is also helping us out, but I think kind of like going back to not knowing initially when I first heard the band, not really knowing if I could find my way in. Now I find the band so fulfilling that if it's writing with the guys, exchanging voice memos, I've talked to these guys ad nauseum about how anytime I get a voice memo of something they're working on, I just need to sneak away and listen to it, and can't wait till I get a moment to write to it. But I get to do a lot of the graphic design of the shirts or merchandise we make. And one of the beautiful things about our band is I think if you want to do something, if there's a part of you that's fulfilled by whatever it is, you can explore it. visually, I know the other guys, like, it's not just about like playing their instruments. It's just like wholly fulfilling in a lot of ways for me. And every aspect of the band is pretty fun. Like, it's like you maybe have an idea and you talk to one of the other guys about it, and Viggy uses this kind of term all the time, but we're a very yes and, like you bring an idea and somebody will be like, oh, what if we did this? And then somebody else will be like, oh, yeah, we could do this other thing. And it's very inspiring to like have encouragement from everybody.
Absolutely. Some of what you're touching on, RJ, is, there are roles beyond just playing the instruments sometimes in a band. I know, there's always kind of the guy that deals with the venues and that sort of stuff, or the sound guy, maybe in particular instances, the lead communicator of the band, if you will. So there's various roles that a band can have. It kind of harkens back to something that I was touched by that Viggy said in a live performance that I saw online. And he was speaking to, I believe it was in Oakland. I unfortunately don't remember the name of the venue, but it was kind of looked like a DIY venue, maybe a house venue or something like that. And I believe it was in August of 2023 when you guys performed there. But whenever he was speaking to the crowd, he talked about, you don't have to be creating the zines here tonight. You just showing up does a lot. People don't think that that's important sometimes, but community building is community building. Being a band is being a band. There's so many roles that go into it. At the end of the day, your contributions are important, no matter how you maybe personally perceive them at times.
Yeah, this is one thing I feel really lucky about in the band is that there's a lot of bands that will like. Actually, I don't want to poo-poo anybody else. I'm just gonna say, like, we I think all of us take the idea of DIY very seriously in a way, and it kind of comes naturally to us. So like RJ and I think with the support of Eric, have managed a ton of our sort of visual elements and like, trying to figure out what the artistic, the visual style of this band is going to be. I do most of our booking and engagement with like that sort of business side of the band. RJ does some of the coordination on the business side, but then like Eric really leads on the band as like a how is money spent, how does this work, how does that work, and then like Ray has been super diligent in terms of our merch and making sure we have it on time, making sure we're trying. And the reason I think this is important is that like this, and the thing is like ultimately it doesn't mean everyone has to do everything, like it's ultimately like even with when you go to a potluck, like you need some people there that just show up with a spoon and a bowl, like that's like the most important part. And so I think it's really fulfilling for us to have the ability to all sort of share, not just in the making of this thing and the curating or ideating around it, but like last year, I worked with a couple of friends on putting together a music festival in the Bay Area. It's going to happen again this year called California Kicks. And like Jerome's Dream played, a number of bands played. And it was, we played last year. We're not playing this year, but it's an opportunity to sort of engage with folks across the country and then also like show off what we have in the Bay. And I think like that sort of dialogue is something where it's like there's no like one person, there's no one band, there's no one like that makes that happen. Like a scene exists because of every single person that's involved. And I think that's something that all of us really strongly believe.
It's really awesome. Yeah, and the business of being a band, like you mentioned, Viggy, there's no job too small for anybody. And I feel like, when there's a divide and conquer mindset, people are more invested as well. So these are really great nuggets of knowledge that you're sharing with people. I think that, it's important to highlight because, people don't realize that sometimes about being a band. And, if one person's shouldering all of the responsibilities, there can be some resentment build up maybe and that sort of thing. So it's just like any other relationship. Don't take your partners for granted, right?
Big time. And I think like to kind of like touch on also what Biggie's saying is like for folks that play music like we play that are of a comparable size, like, or just you're a high school band starting out, like you don't get into this kind of music to make money. And as a band, you rely so much on the help of your friends, whether that's like maybe you have one friend that like knows how to screen print, or you have another friend that like is kind of interested in photography and they start showing up to shows. And like there are famous photographers now that just documented like 80s and 90s hardcore. And now, like all of that starts somewhere, and that's just as important, as the people playing the instruments, like the people that are like printing the flyers or making the flyers, like I think a lot of young graphic designers kind of like get their start like figuring out how to make a flyer, and it's like, it's this thing where we all kind of like come up together, and it sucks not to be able to maybe like pay your friend as much as their time is worth. But there's this like mutually beneficial thing where like, I think in early days, like you're excited to get to make something. And that's what it's about. Like whether it's like making the music or making the flyer or like making the zine or figuring out how to use a camera. Like it's all these things that are essential to anybody getting anywhere, and just like being able to like lean on each other. And I think like that's one of the beautiful things about DIY and hardcore is like there's a space for everybody.
Yeah, and the landscape is changing over time and over the years. And RJ, to further kind of some of the points that you're making there, somebody that's very important to me, and I feel like in the scene, globally, that is, and that's Sonny over at 856. I mean, just the bands that he covers, some of the political activism that he's involved in, and even caught the eye and attention of Rage Against the Machine a few years ago. They hired him to go on tour with them and document the tour. I mean, what an incredible person, what incredible work that he's done. But I view him as just as equally as important as anybody else in, the hardcore, the punk scene, the DIY scene, if you will. The exposure that it gives to even lesser known bands, just by simply recording a 20-minute set. It's just wonderful to see what he does for the community.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, and to a young band, like, that's the coolest, greatest gift you could get. Like, you're like, oh my God, somebody recorded us? Like, that's so exciting.
Like when I was, we started off talking about like sort of our histories in music. And when I was super young, I think being like a little Indian American kid, and, there weren't a lot of like brown kids in music. There was a LiveJournal group for those of you who are, old enough to remember, called DESI Rock. And it was like people who were into rock music who were brown. And this was like early 2000s, like 2001, 2002, 2003. And I met friends that I have to this day through that group. It still exists, I think, as like a Facebook group and stuff. But Sonny was on there, and he was just a kid who loved Rage Against the Machine and hardcore music. And I think the reason like I'm bringing this up is both that like, there's all like I think first there's like always a place for you. There's always, and like we aren't the only two people that were in there. There's like there's a person I know who's now a journalist at Al Jazeera who's on there. Like there's other musicians, filmmakers, like artists who I've met. But in addition to that, it's that like, we look at Sonny now and we're like, wow, like all this work he's doing. But it's like he's also just like any of us, was just like a kid who was like, I love these bands and I want to take video of them. And I think that's like really important to remember. Like the actor Riz Ahmed was in that group, and he was like rapping back then, right? And he like, and so, I think it's important to remember that like everyone is, it's like a good reminder that like everyone who does this are just people who like are just as stoked as any one of us is.
Absolutely. Man, I'd love to hear that. That's some nuggets of knowledge that I did not know otherwise. So, guys, with the new album being recorded now, what are the plans for shows, tours? You got any of that in the works? Can you talk about any of that?
We actually can about some of it, because I think it's going to be announced by the time this airs. So the record comes out in mid to late June. We're still working on what the date's going to be, but that's when you should expect to hear it. And there'll probably be some singles in the months coming up, so April, May. Our next show is beginning of March. We're playing with Cancer Bats and Strawberry Girls.
Beginning of May.
Or beginning of May, that's right. Yeah, we're beginning of March right now. Beginning of May 2nd, we're playing at the Parkside. So if there are any Bay Area listeners, come out. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a little tour with Masanera, and then playing your Renaissance Fest down in LA with a ton of bands. Portraits of Past, kind of like Spitting. Goodness, it's like a bunch of reunions, as well as some like really cool new bands and friends of ours like Othiel and Namirs, who will also be on there. And then in August, we're playing New Friends Fest out in Toronto. And while I don't know the whole lineup, I know for sure that it's getting announced tomorrow, and it's Rollo Tomasi is going to be coming stateside again. On the Might of Princes is going to be playing. Home is Where we'll be playing. So that's also going to be a blast, and we're hoping to do like something around that as well. And then we'll probably have some plans for something else toward the end of the year that might not be announced by the time this airs. So yeah, I think like, you know, we're hoping to show up in a couple more cities than we have in the past, and hopefully, you know, folks who are listening on the East Coast or the Midwest, y'all should be able to, you know, not drive too far to see us this year.
That's awesome. Well, I'm hoping we get a St. Louis date, because I'll be happy to see you guys and line myself up right in the front row. We got a really cool DIY punk venue here in St. Louis called the Sinkhole that I highly recommend to folks if they're looking for a place to play. They treat people good. It's an inclusive environment. Everybody turns out, shows up. Just a great place. Cheap drinks, if that matters to you. You know, I've been to countless shows there. I couldn't even tell you how many that of all ages, and you know, anything punk adjacent, hardcore, emo, post-hardcore, even sludge and drone bands and doom metal bands have played there. So it's a wonderful, wonderful venue. Can't recommend it enough.
I've always thought St. Louis has a great scene. Love Foxing,
yeah.
Great band.
Yes, yeah, Foxing's good. We do have a really good scene, and the hardcore scene in particular, metal scene's kind of had a second wind in it. Again, I think a lot of similar things for the bands and creatives in this area. You know, the pandemic time hit and kind of hit a reset. We had a really great run in the 2000s, and around about 2010, things kind of started to taper off. A few key venues and things like that started to close down, and the DIY scene wasn't being as encouraged enough, I should say. You know, you had to be of a certain level, if you will, to even open for like a touring act coming through. So unfortunately, there's a bit of a lull there, but there's been a lot of good folks just churning out the work and making things happen. And venues like the Sinkhole, another great venue off Broadway in St. Louis. They've been around for some time, but they've went a little bit more heavy leaning in some of the bands that they bring in there as well. Used to, you know, be able to catch I remember they had like R&B artists there. Like, yeah, now they're more prominently bringing in more heavy bands and stuff, and good crowds show up there too. Lots of good people in the scene in St. Louis. Can't give enough love for sure.
Yeah, hope to visit sometime.
Absolutely. Well, I know you guys will have some people that'll like you, even if they haven't heard you before. And there's few times in my life that, and I don't know if it's just because I've heard so much music and, you know, I've experienced a lot in my time already, but, you know, listening to an artist for the first time and knowing that, you know, this is going to work for you is rare these days to happen as frequently as it used to. Let's put it that way. And I know that when I first heard DROUGHT, this is what we need. This is what we need. So I'm so happy that you guys are making music. I'm happy to hear more is coming. Happy to hear you guys are going to be hitting the road, hitting more dates so more people can find out about you as well.
Thanks. And also, it shouldn't go without being said, like, thank you for having us. You know, this is all like, it's very cool to have people be interested in what you're doing or what we're doing. And it's just like, it means a lot to us. So thanks for taking the interest.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. I just like to know the people behind the art. To me, that's a part of, you know, being a fan of a band and enjoying them and their music. You know, it's always nice to know that you get some real people on the other side of those instruments with their own stories that you can connect and relate to. And so I hope our conversation tonight led our audience to make some connections here and be excited about seeing you guys in the future and check you out further. Of course, we're going to have everything in the episode details, the links to check you guys out, your Iodine listening, your Bandcamp, that sort of stuff. Let's buy whatever physical merch when we can from these guys. Let's support them. Let's keep the dream alive. That's what makes these things happen, is getting out and supporting. Go see them at a local date near you very soon as well.
Thank you.
You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys' time tonight. You've been very generous. And folks, we will see you on the other side. Thank you all, DROUGHT, for showing up tonight, and loved the conversation.
Hello, this is Barrett from the ATI podcast, here to talk about the MANIC Compression Group. The various podcasts that make up the MANIC Compression Group include ATI Podcast, Waxing On with R&J, Nod Narb's Closet from Ed Ozen, and It's Just Two Movies. The MANIC Compression Group is a voice for the voiceless, a platform for those dream chasers. The various creative arms of the MANIC Compression Group all have one goal in mind, and that is to bring a spotlight to underground artists and amazing artistic works. ATI Podcast, hosted by yours truly, focuses in on interviewing rising artists, content creators, and small businesses. Waxing On with R&J, hosted by brothers Ridge and Jake Jackson, gives love to physical media. It promotes purchasing physical media as a means to support artists, album reviews, details on production and audio quality on various formats, all with the end goal in mind to give some love to some amazing artists. Outside of the physical media love, you're going to get reviews on recent concert viewing experiences, as well as local show calendars. Nod Narb's Closet focuses in on miniature painting, the D&D world, role-play games, as well as various niches in the hobbies of 40k Warhammer, Dungeons & Dragons, and tabletop RPGs. Led by Brandon Stewart of Ed Ozen, Nod Narb's Closet brings attention to the many talented people involved in the hobby. It's Just Two Movies, hosted by Danny King in a rotating guest panel, covers just that, two movies. One critically acclaimed or favorably viewed, and a secondary movie probably not good, but the hope is that it is so bad that it's entertaining. Sit back, enjoy some libations to the velvety tones of Danny King and guests, with an injection of jocularity and improv comedy. The MANIC Compression Group can be found across all podcasting platforms, but the full experience can always be enjoyed on YouTube. We thank you all. Stay safe out there.